All right, I got a fun build for you guys today. I've been looking forward to doing this one for a little while. It's part woodworking, it's part art. It should be a lot of fun, and I hope you guys take on the project and do it with me. We're going to be building signs. So in this case, I'm building a sign for my daughter's room to go in her door, and I'm going to be going through everything it requires to do this project. You can also find that in the description. So to start with what you need, obviously you're going to need some sort of wood. In this case, I'm going to be using my reclaimed redwood. You guys are probably wondering about how much I have of this, but I'm going to keep utilizing it until I run out. You can use anything. Go get some pine, get some cheap at Lowe's or Home Depot. We're going to need a saw to cut it down to size. I'm going to be using a circular saw. Mine's kind of already cut to size anyway. And you can also get that cut at Lowe's or Home Depot. Most importantly, you're going to need a router in this case. So you can use a trim router, or you can use a plunge router. I will be using a plunge router to be easier, but either will work. You're going to need a way to transfer your design to the wood. We're going to be like kind of tracing this thing onto the wood. You can go up to Hobby Lobby or Michael's. You can get some lettering. It just depends on how you want to do it. You can hand draw it. There's a bunch of ways. I built a template that I'll be utilizing, and you'll see that in a little bit. You're going to need special bits for this, especially since you're going to be tracing and really getting into some details potentially. I'm going to be using a profile bit and a carving liner bit to do this. Again, that'll be in the description. And then you're going to need your basic woodworking tools, sander, potentially clamps in your wood, and glue, so forth. Also, for my build, you don't have to do this, but I'm going to do colored in mine. I will be using an epoxy and mica powder. I'll be mixing that up and putting it into the lettering, and then I'm going to do a clear coat over it all. So there will be a bit of an epoxy in this job as well too. So you could easily just use paint if you wanted to. Spray paint it and then do a sand over the top to color it. There's a bunch of ways to do that too. So we'll be talking about that. Oh, please join me in this build. It's going to be a ton of fun. In my case, the first thing I got to do is clean up the wood and sand it. So we're going to do that now. All right, that was easy. Here's my template. I'm going to use double-sided tape, and I've attached it to this piece of wood. It's going to kind of go like this. I'm going to cut this down to size after I do the cutout. But we're going to be running the router in between this grooving. This is where I was saying you can do this a bunch of different ways. You can actually just draw this on here and trace. We need to make sure this thing is secure to my table. Don't want this thing sliding around, moving around on you. I'm going to be clamping this on to my table. Need to make sure the clamps are out of the way too. And the main thing here is you don't want to take your router bit too deep. You just want to really go down a little bit at a time. All right, you may have to forgive me on the terminology, but we're going to be attaching this. I believe it's a collet. And this is going to attach into the router, but essentially this keeps you from cutting into your template. So you could actually reuse this over and over and over. So I'm going to slide around inside of this. My bit's going to go through here. I'm going to attach it now and I'll show you. Okay, one of the most important things you need to do before you do anything else, before you actually use the router, is you need to make sure this base plate is centered. So I've loosened and broken up all these screws, and then I have this guide. This is a centering guide. You may have a cone, you might have something else, but you need to make sure your base plate is centered when you're using the setup here. So for this guy, I got to use that piece. Okay, now I've got this punched through. Show you. So now it's nice and centered. With that there, I'm going to go ahead and tighten everything down. I got my carving liner here. Drop that bit in. Okay. Now we want to adjust the depth of the bit where it barely pokes through. All right, so I don't know if you can tell, but that's how much bit I'm going to have pushing through when I start to cut this out. I'm going to give that a start. So it's the distance from the top of this collet to the point that's actually cutting into the wood. All right, so we got it all cut out, at least the Ava part. So I'm going to try to keep this from breaking. Who knows, maybe I'll reuse it for something. So I think I'm going to come back in with the carver bit and freehand this, clean this up a little bit, clean this up a little bit. Okay, I'm working on a sign for a business today. And you know, I wanted to show you both options. I spray painted the logo on for the business, and I'm going to be using the trim router with a carving liner. And this is for detailed, extremely detailed work. And we're just going to go around the perimeter and trace out essentially the black. We're going to do the outside first. I just wrapped up the intricate line work on the perimeter, really the detailed tracing. It kind of looks like a literate termite has gone to hell on this piece of wood. But we're about to do the cleanup with the V-groove, and we're going to try to get in and clean out the majority of the material. It's all this right here. So I'm going to change that bit. Okay, we just finished up doing the proper festive sign. It'll look really good once we do the epoxy, sand this thing up, and do all that. But yeah, this is what it looks like when you do it by hand. You could clean it up more on the inside if you really needed to, but because I'm using epoxy, I don't need to. I'm about to glue Ava's room sign together. You can see the differences using that guide, how much more the material, how much cleaner it is on the inside. Plus the lines are just cleaner. And I gotta do this union booth, which goes with the proper festive. So I gotta carve that out too, using the plunge router. Okay. It is incredibly windy here. Like bonkers windy. We never get this kind of wind. This is like coastal winds. It's insane. Anyway, the signs are routed out, you know, manual CNC. I think it looks good. We're getting ready to sand, clean them up, and I'm gonna glue them together. And then it'll be time for epoxy. We're gonna do, I believe, black in the lettering on both, and then a gold seam right here. And these are actually two separate businesses. It doesn't look good. All right, we're set up to do the epoxy. I have Ava's room. I have the two signs, doing a two-part epoxy, watching the humidity and temperature. You really want to be at 70 or higher in your Fahrenheit for your temp and lower in your humidity. Just me being here talking, the humidity is going up, but you want to be below 70 at least for these epoxies. And I have the mica powder to do the coloring. I'm going to be mixing all of that together. And to see what's going on here, I have these two wood blocks that we're gluing to the end. Since we're doing like a little river table, we need to keep the epoxy from running out of that center channel. So hopefully this works and blocks that off. It's been a couple days now after pouring the epoxy, and I wanted to show you what it looks like before you sand it and how, you know, not pretty it is. It's all been inlaid into the lettering. I'll let you, it's a messy business. You know, we got all these mixing cups, there's epoxy everywhere. I'll let you decide if it's worth that mess to get to the final product. But now I'm gonna get to sanding and cleaning it up, cutting these little blocks off, and you know, actually get to the, in my opinion, kind of the fun part, because you see the final result start to come through at this stage. Ta-da, ba-bam. Ba-bam, ta-da. This is what it looks like after you take off all the extra epoxy and you get it down to the wood where it's nice and flush. If you have a belt sander, you might want to use that, or a drum sander before you go to the fine finish, the fine grit sandpaper. You know, finishing it with a palm sander, it takes a while to take off the epoxy to bring it down. You're going to get some forearm strength doing it unless you got a belt sander. This is what the belt sander does, you know, to the wood and the epoxy. You see how like kind of white it is, and then use like a 220 palm sander to get this kind of finish. It is very matte right now and the colors are very dull. Once we pour the top coat of epoxy, all of this should pop. I have it on these blocks like this, so I'm going to do a flood coat, a very, very light flood coat. Is there something between just a light rain and a flood? Anyway, we're going to do a coat of epoxy and all of this should pop. The wood will pop, the lettering will pop, the coloring will pop, 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 pop. Here we go. Okay, here's the finished product. I'm gonna go over some of the complications I ran into so you don't run into them, learn from my mistakes. Once I applied the top coat of epoxy, it was so shiny. It was like a mirror finish, and you couldn't really read the sign because of that. So I took a 220 grit, sanded it down, and then applied a top coat of roll-on polyurethane semi-gloss, and it really took down some of that shine. But you still can see the colors coming through. You see the wood grain. It's a protectant. Oh, it looks good. And then just so you're aware, like when you're adding your colors, like anything, the back coloring of the wood will affect the coloring of the resin. So in like Ava's room, it was a very bright pink, but I didn't go super deep on the carving. And this is a much darker wood. So it actually darkened the pink of the lettering. So knowing that, I think I would have added a lot more mica powder so it wasn't as transparent, and I think that coloring would have come through better. Like, you know, the coloring that I was desiring, that really bright pink. But all in all, it looks good, and I'm happy the way it turned out. I'm gonna go ahead and mount this one. So I'll have some photos here. And then I'm gonna use these examples to put this on Etsy and Facebook Marketplace and see if these sell. And I'll have a follow-up video in, I don't know, a month or so to give the results, do these sell or not. But yeah, I hope you guys attempt the same thing, and let me know if you guys try to sell them or not and what your results were. I'd love to see some of your products. Thanks.